Deleted Session, June 11, 1981. Now, Ruber's body is now addressing itself to those areas that deal primarily with motion and locomotion, and in writing the body's balance. Ruber cannot understand all of the processes that are involved, but the body knows what is to be done, and is working with its own rhythms. This may cause temporary disorientation, but that will also pass, as you can see. Certain portions of the body were released this evening. By all means, let Ruber continue to express his feelings to you about the situation, however, and reassure him of his body's competence. Work is being done that will vastly improve the double vision condition also. Now, about Prentice. I do not want to lay stress upon any negative effects, but to explain differences of opinion and behavior. The initial relationship began some time ago, of course, and in a fashion had its own background as far as Ruber was concerned. When he wrote short stories, for example, he was forced to search for a publisher for each one, a magazine. He learned to deal with the various editors by mail. He sold most of his stories to fantasy and science fiction magazine when Butcher was the editor. Later, editors did not see eye to eye with him about his work. He learned that his work must be sold in the marketplace if he wanted to continue writing. He tried unsuccessfully to publish several novels. When Frederick Phil took the ESP book, he was delighted. In a fashion, Phil represented the next step upward from, say, pulp magazines. On the other hand, Phil did not go for the next projects that he either offered or had in mind, nor did Ace Books, who fell into the same category. He considered Prentice Hall a further extant step upward, a reputable enough publisher. Tom as editor did not go for his first, or that is, Ruber's first presentation, however, but suggested the book that ended up as the set material. In many ways, Tan and Ruber got along quite well, even though Tan was a good deal younger, where before Ruber's editors had been people a good deal older than he. When the book was done, Ruber began another, along with several different attempts. Dreams, Astral Projection, and ESP, I believe, was to be the title. Ruber signed for the book, but had difficulty with his presentation, and it represented his indecisions. So Tan respectfully at first suggested large alterations. Ruber himself recognized the book's deficiencies, and he and Tan together hit upon the idea of switching my book, Seth Speaks, which was not yet contracted for, instead of Dreams. Ruber was therefore impressed to the ears with the necessity of getting a book to market, and of the importance of a decent working relationship with an editor, particularly in the uncertainties of even usual freelancing writing were taken into consideration. Ruber's subject matter, however, was not routine, partly back in those times. He felt that its unique nature meant that it could be quite difficult to sell. When he and Tan began to reach a relatively workable relationship, therefore, he began to value this more and more. He felt that in the beginning, Tom stood up for him at Prentice several times, and Tan, it seemed, kept his hands away from the manuscript itself in the one way that Ruber clearly understood. He did not generally change the copy. As the years went by, Tan and Ruber arrived at certain methods of operation that suited Ruber personally and that were understood by both of them. These methods of operation involved certain evidences of play, some social charter, mutual trust, and left open the doors to a certain kind of unpredictable pattern of development, a pattern in which, for example, Tan could recognize the latent book in the Emerald Dream and help find Ruber to write it, even though eventually Prentice was not the publisher. These were not elements of behavior that seemed particularly businesslike, however. Overall, Ruber felt quite competent, however, even in bundling away at his advances $2,000 at a time. He valued the relative pertinency of the association, judging it in his mind against other situations in which time might otherwise be necessary to find a different publisher for each book, or an agent with whom Ruber might feel rapport. Period. The national economic situation led him to value that relationship still further. He made comparisons, of course, between that relationship and what he knew of other publishers through reading or through direct dealings, such as with Elner, for example. He valued the more or less clear channel of operation from the completion of a book by himself to its publication. Now, overall, he wanted an attractive package, of course, yet to him the book was in the copy mainly. The Bentham photograph covers did displease him, but in a fashion he did not expect any more from the mass paperback situation. For some time he felt competent then in those business dealings. He felt loyalty to Tan, who he felt was loyal to him. At the same time, he did not idealize Tan and was well aware of some of his natural feelings. Many of the typos, for example, did not exist for Ruber. He valued the good feelings that existed between himself and Tan, and quite preferred, for example, not to deal with too many other people at Prentice, but to keep the situation as simple as possible. They settled many matters by hastily scribbled notes, and by other methods that sometimes did not even seem to deal with the matter at hand. He trusted you in the manuscript itself of a Seth book to provide the accuracy of record, in which he felt he was himself relatively deficient, and also to contribute the background material he felt so necessary, yet which he found difficult himself, and he valued, of course, your loyalty, support, and inspiration. He therefore became upset whenever there were difficulties in which you and Prentice disagreed, or you and he disagreed, and he became highly uneasy if you and Tan seemed to disagree. He began to feel less competent in his dealings. He began to feel somewhat humiliated that as a woman he needed his husband to take care of such matters, and he felt frightened not only by such circumstances, but of course by the changes going on at Prentice itself and by Tan's own growing restlessness. He realized that at another house he might receive more money or more publicity, or possibly another more aesthetically presented package. Yet against the other uncertainties and vicissitudes, he felt he had an acceptable framework of operation, whose difficulties were minimal enough under the circumstances, one that provided creative freedom since, until Emerald, Prentice had published his world-view books, poetry and novels, as well as my book. He made the Emerald decision, regretfully but very clearly. The problem with the contracts and the entire translation affair bothered you both deeply. Rupert felt at times that you were too severe on occasion in your dealings with Tan for a while. The entire situation bothered him deeply. He valued the relationship with Prentice, and he valued the idea of distributing the books in foreign lands, even if that venture meant misunderstandings or quite deliberate translations, such as the shortening of one book. Feeling that Prentice, while negligent, was not deliberately negligent, and that the situation would be rightened and the material restored. That involved the deletion of copy. You see, he agreed with you thoroughly there, though he did not agree about your opinion of Prentice per se. Involving the difficulty, he blamed the foreign publisher. He felt, however, that some of your own anger against the foreign publisher was directed at him. Much of this involved simple differences in temperament. He did not deny the fact of your own visually acute behavior. He felt stupid when you became annoyed at typos or misspellings or whatever that he did not even perceive until you mentioned them. He felt between you and Prentice and Tan at various stages, of course, and did not feel certain of his own capacity to set the relationship right. He also began to distrust his own earlier methods of dealing with the situation. He is pleased now that both books are on the market. He is pleased with their appearance. There are a few other issues I will add, including his changing attitudes and yours toward the disclaimer. But that is for another evening. I bid you a fond good evening. Rob said thank you.